Welcome, welcome on a beautiful, spectacular Cape Cod October day. And we have some color in the room, pretty outfits. Thank you all for coming today. Okay, the first thing is that I want to welcome the guests. So would the guests please stand? Wait, hold on. You can't sit down that fast. Back up, please. Name and something about yourself. Well, welcome. You're in the right place.
Thank you.
Okay, our speakers are guests also, who we will introduce.
Rinaldo from Dallas, and some comments to make in a few minutes. Kevin Doyle, partner in the program as well.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Over there.
Hi, I'm Kim O'Loughlin from East Allen. I've been here about a year, moved from Medfield. And I just bought one of your paintings like a month ago.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I should have taken the microphone for everyone.
My name is Deb Reedy. I'm from Shrewsbury. I'm down visiting my friend, and that's why I'm here today. Okay. So I'm keeping the distance.
All right, well, thanks for coming. Okay, let's see the new members. Rise. Rise, new members. Welcome, let's give them a hand. Okay, let's do the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so I have a lot of announcements today. So in our next luncheon, which is going to be in November, we are going to be having a holiday bazaar. And in the bazaar, we're going to be asking anyone, we're going to be raising money for our scholarship fund. So we also welcome donations. We're going to have, I think tentatively we've set it up, you might be able to start looking before the luncheon, and then after the luncheon, you can browse around through the vendors. We're going to have about 12 to 14 vendors. They're going to be local artisans. So whatever you buy, you'll be able to take home with you. You won't have to wait for a truck from China. We also are going to be having, forgive me if I'm not politically correct, but I don't know the new name for it yet, a Chinese auction. So we hope to see everyone there. You should start planning now to bring anyone you can think of. Again, another fundraiser. So we'd like to have a packed house, and it should be really fun and festive for everyone. So we hope to see you there. In December, we're going to be having the baby shower, and Mary Liz is going to come up and talk about that when I finish all the other announcements. She'll be our getting to know you speaker today, and she'll explain more details about that. In December, also, we're going to have our annual book club luncheon at the Cape Club. And this year, we are welcoming, well, first I'm going to say, who is not in a book club? Can you stand? I'm trying to give you exercise today.
Not what
Okay, wait a minute. Everyone stand who is not in a book club. Nancy, you are not in a book club? Okay, you lucky people are going to be welcomed to our book club luncheon. So, at the Cape Club, it is going to be fabulous. This year, we're going to welcome everyone. So if you want to prepare, our speaker is going to be Catherine Grace Katz, who wrote the book, The Daughters of Yalta. So you do not have to read the book, those of you who are not in book clubs. Everyone in the book clubs will be reading the book, but those of you who are not in book clubs are absolutely welcome, and we would love to have you join us for that luncheon at the Cape Club. And that is going to be on December 9th, a Thursday. Welcome, Susan. Okay, for our spectacular event, chaired by Barbara Marcio, a couple weeks ago, we raised over $9,000. So Barbara and her team did an incredible job. Let's have the team stand up and we can give them a hand. Okay, and next month, Barbara is going to, at our luncheon next month, Barbara is going to present the check capabilities. So we have a lot of exciting things coming up. All right, now, does anyone in here know Cheryl Silks? Okay, that's just an aside. All right. Okay, our email blasts. We know that you're getting a lot of blasts. We're a little bit worried that some of them are going into your spam folder. So I've had a number of people telling me they're not getting this announcement or that announcement. So you have to look carefully when you get something from MWC and it's in from Meg. It's going to be some kind of announcement about something going on. And we've had a lot of new groups added recently. So it's important that you try to read them and maybe check your spam file periodically to make sure that they haven't gone there. All right. So we have a few minutes. I'm going to have Mary. Yeah, I'm going to have, okay, before that. All right, so the other thing is that today is Joanne's birthday. She's not here. So we would like to give a big shout out and thank Joanne for all the work that she's done for the Mashpee Women's Club and wish her a happy birthday.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday! Okay, now I'm going to introduce Mary Liz, who's going to give you all the details about the baby shower coming up in December. I'm surrounded by yarn.
Thank you, Diane. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Mary Liz McCahill. I'm the Director of Membership for the Mashpee Women's Club. I've lived on Cape Cod full-time for 6 years. We had a condo here for many, many years beforehand. I moved here and I lived across the street, moved in across the street from Laura Kuzia. And we all know Laura, we all love Laura, who invited me to a luncheon and then invited me to a board meeting, and all of a sudden I was on the board. It was like, how did that happen? In my previous life, I was Director of Admissions at a girls' Catholic high school. So by doing membership here, I'm really doing the same thing and welcoming and keeping all your data straight. So when you join, you get an email from me. I send out the directories. When I put on the list that you want book club or knitting or bowling or whatever other organization we're part of. If you want to change it, any questions, give me a call. I'm in the directory. You've all got an email from me or stop me somewhere along the way. I think the Mashpee Women's Club is a wonderful organization to get to know a variety of people. And as everybody says, the the more you do, the more you know, the more fun you have. So, I know there was a knitting group going when I started, and it was filled. So I started another one, and it's been so much fun. And last year in pandemic, we knit outside every other week all year long. We didn't knit a whole lot because you can't knit in 30-degree weather and your fingers don't work, but it was the one thing that got us through. We sat around the fire pit. It was a BYO bring your own lunch and a warm hot toddy or cider, and it helped us survive. So I hope you all have found friendship that way. A baby center, to segue, is located in Hyannis off Main Street, and it's run by the Federated Churches of Hyannis and supported by it. They do phenomenal things for our littlest Cape Codders. There's such a dichotomy of the haves and have-nots and the needy on Cape Cod. And especially in this year where the wait staff or the people, so many people have been out of work and in such need, that they have provided diapers and clothing and pajamas and toiletries and everything for our littlest Cape Codders. Just to give you a little information. The vision of the baby center is to fill in the cracks where local or federal assistance is just not enough to provide baby essentials to parents of infants in poverty on Cape Cod and the islands.
No, Dana, we're Dana.
We need one more person. Diane, come on, up here. And Sue White, bring your things up here. And grab all the clothesline and walk around. Approximately 350 parents.
Oh my God. Mary Liz and Karen did do that, and Sue did that, but Diane and I did not do that. Diane was not.
A baby center serves 350 parents monthly on Cape Cod and the islands. That serves 450 babies. They give out 75 diapers a month to each family. And every baby that comes in, every newborn, receives a gift basket that includes toiletries, clothes, pajamas, and always a baby blanket. Well, yesterday on Facebook, there was a desperate need for baby blankets. They're down to 2. It was a call for all crafters and quilters and knitters and crocheters. I realized yesterday, I learned yesterday, they belong to the have a relationship with the National Diaper Bank Network, which is funded by Huggies. And if we make a donation to a baby center, they can therefore buy like 3 times the amount of diapers through this federal national organization that is funded by Huggies than if we just go buy a box of diapers. So if you want to send $25 or $100 or whatever you want to and support this organization, it's a great thing. For a long time, I was collecting coupons, and we had a table out front. Of course, pandemic kind of changed everything, and I don't know even if there are coupons in the newspaper. But start looking again for coupons and BJ's coupons. Because Linda Gervich and Terry and a couple of other people were sending me coupons. Sigrid Howell was great about doing that, and we would send it in. They're most in need of diapers, pull-ups, and any clothing for ages 12 months through 5T. 5 years is kind of the cutoff of what they support. So anything you want to buy, if you want to go to Marshall's or Carter's or whatever, buy anything like that. So a couple of years ago, we did a baby shower in May, because May is the month of Mary and mothers and everything. So we did a baby shower, and there were 2 8-foot tables along that wall, laden with knitted things, diapers, toys, clothes. You can't believe how generous our organization was. We were supposed to do it May of 20, and of course, nothing was happening then. So we moved it to December. We are so fortunate to be the haves here. Joanne came up with the idea that let's be generous and make this a Christmas for those who do not. So that's why we're, instead of our normal fun time in December, we're going to do this. The director and assistant director of programs are coming from a baby center, and they're going to tell you more about it. But let's lay that table again with gifts and toys and money donations, and be generous about it and support our little escape cutters. Any questions? Fine.
Will you be sending out on email a list of the things you can?
I'm going to give this to Lisa and to Meg, and they'll work on publicity, and also Meg will put it on, Meg over there will put on an email blast. So yes, you will get all my notes today. Any other questions? Thank you in advance. I know you'll be very generous.
Thank you, Mary Liz. So, I guess we don't have time for our icebreakers today when I make you all get up and mix, because we're already eating, so enjoy.
We have your paintings in our home. In 1994, the National Association of Congregational Christian Churches commissioned Karen in 1994, 27 years ago, to do a historically accurate picture of the first Thanksgiving, and it's big. It says here it's 36 by 60 inches, the real one. It's at the Falmouth Museums until probably mid-November, Saturdays, if anyone's interested in going there. Karen is an artist who is historically accurate, and that's the beauty of this particular painting, that it is accurate. And that Kevin said to me, she's a visual historian. And I actually wrote that phrase down because it's such an important component of today's talk. She has made this beautiful painting for you all to see and share, and she's going to talk about it today. Via her artwork, Kevin entered her life, and Kevin is a retired combat veteran. Thank you for your service, Kevin. Let's do it. He's a writer and a lecturer on historical events. So this was kismet when the two met. Karen had the photo, and Kevin had the writing ability to bring it to life. So it's our pleasure today at Vacherie Women's Club to bring these two special people to talk to you about the first Thanksgiving. Kevin, Karen.
Welcome, and thank you to the Mashpee Women's Club. Kevin and I are delighted to be here. We're honored to be here. And thank you to the New Seabury Country Club for all your assistance and for the delicious meal. We're about to present to you an amazing story via a visual presentation of the painting that I was blessed and humbled to receive a commission to create. Sometimes in your lifetime, you meet someone, or an opportunity is presented to you, or something happens that changes your life. In this case, it was a commission, but it was also meeting someone who I later on in years would be able to collaborate with, because as an artist, the work that I do is totally solo. And now to have someone that you can trust and who can work with your ideas in a collaboration and in a successful then addressing of a very important subject is very special. So Kevin, I thank you for everything you do. Your assistance is invaluable.
I just do what I'm told.
So we have up on the screen the image of the first Thanksgiving, 1621. I'll take you back to when it was commissioned. I received a commission in 1994, and the commission is a daunting request by the National Association of Congregational Christian Churches They're known as the Pilgrim's Church. They're located out in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. And the items that they're addressing that need to be incorporated in is the total population at the time of the feast, that being the 90 natives and the 52 colonists, 91 natives including Massasoit, that it be historically accurate, and that was the part that was daunting. I didn't know if this could be accomplished. I didn't know if there was information that would carry this commission forward. And so I did my homework with the Pilgrim Hall Museum in Plymouth, with Plymouth Plantation, with their directors, their archive departments, and with an individual who was in charge of Indigenous Affairs at Plymouth Plantation. His name was Nanny Pashaman, a Wampanoag. He was actually from Mashpee. And he went by the name, his last name was Pollard. And he actually passed away very shortly after the piece was created. But he helped me and guided me through the process of addressing the attitude and the whole way in which the Wampanoags would have been attending this 3-day event. They would have an apprehensive look. They would have a quality of being on guard, because in fact, that was why they were there. But the story too, going back to the Pilgrims, is a fascinating one. The story behind the natives, again, just an incredible time in our history. And the responsibility that is handed to you is enormous. In working through all the obstacles and in trying to find information on the subject, I get to a point where I realize, yes, I think this can be done. I've addressed the question to the director at Plymouth Plantation, Jim Baker. He says take it on like one puzzle piece at a time, and I think it can be accomplished over a period of 6 months of research and total dedication to the task. It was accomplished, and through the process of creating this piece, I would step back at every interval and document it in what now is a 14-minute video, documenting every brushstroke in the painting, which has served to be a very valuable component to the painting. Why did they select me to do the work? Is a question that Kevin asked in a previous presentation that we did. I think it was something that the organization was looking for, someone who was dedicated and who could be totally focused on one subject and the mission of it, and in conveying the message that they were trying to convey with it. And so I had dedicated from 1974 to 1976, a 3-year period of time, bicentennial paintings for all of the Cape Cod towns. This was one of a montage style that would incorporate many of the landmarks on Cape Cod. So they're looking for someone, as I said, who can make a commitment, and I had already invested 27 years of historical subjects to the drawing board, to the easel. Let's go back. So had invested 27 years of working historical subjects. Worked with, and you'll see an image as soon as it comes up, an image of Katherine Lee Bates and the history of her life that had never been done before. There were some murals in the town hall that went through the history of our town. There was New England Bicentennial, incorporating many of the landmarks of New England, of Mashpee was one of the early ones that was done in 1974, and the center focus shows a wampanoag from the vineyard, and also Earl Mills, Chief Flying Eagle, who we have a statement that he makes in our book, In the Wake of the Mayflower. And a lot of the landmarks you'll recognize in the town of Mashpee. But these were prints that the towns then would take, and they would raise money for different needs that they had within the town. So at that time, the posters may have sold for $5 or $10, but that money raised went towards other needs that the town had. And what was interesting in collaborating with the book, we decided that the back of the book then would become rather like a travelogue. And so all of the 15 towns are located in the back of the book with a description of the landmarks in each town. This was a piece that was done for the 125th anniversary for Mashpee, and it was also incorporated in some literature that they had. This was a commemorative program that they used it for. And you'll notice the feathers, that was part of their headdress, the dugout canoes. The suggestion, a lot of times I'll incorporate subliminal messages, and so the milkweed pods and the wind blowing, it's kind of a subliminal message there to the winds of change. This was in celebration of their 2000 recognizing Mashpee with a logo that was developed for them, and they have the original of the slide previous. It's at the Mashpee Archives, and this shows one of the images in color. But getting back to the book, that was an interesting part of the collaborating. We were doing it long distance. Kevin was in one section of Massachusetts, and I was here on the Cape, and we would send messages back and forth, email and copies via photographs. And we would discuss elements of the history we were trying to convey, important points. And then we decided on a vignette style that wouldn't be read like your typical book, but you could pull different sections that you might be interested in. And take that.
That's why I'm here.
And we'll get to you in a minute. So over the course of the 6 months, people have asked the question, so how did you develop the figures? How did you create the figures? We'll get to Katherine in a minute, but there's just so much that goes into the painting, I don't want to miss important points.
Yep.
And so like a forensic scientist, you read little passages. It can be something as simple as, it was a fair-haired child. It was a person that had a heavy weight. In one case, it was a military leader, and you built on little descriptions there. There was one portrait of Edward Winslow, but that was really all that you had of a visual nature to go on. So now I'm going to go ahead to Katherine Lee Bates here. Again, I'm getting stuck on the slide. The interesting thing that happens sometimes, I think it's a rarity, but you've heard the expression, something takes on a life of its own. And in the case of the 1621 painting, it took on a life of its own from the moment that it was released from my hands. This was the montage of Katherine Lee Bates, and it is part of the Museums on the Greens collection. The notes that you see from America the Beautiful, they're actually raised from the surface of the painting so that if one was visually impaired, you could feel the notes.
That's beautiful.
You know, she did this one, and she also did another one that was used as a New York art seminar, as you can see. When you talk about a visual historian, she not only did Katherine Lee Bates, she also did Tony Bennett. And she did Tony Bennett at the request of Joan Kennedy, who had called Karen to do one of the paintings of her house, as many of you have had her do paintings of your houses. And then she said she wanted to give something to Tony Bennett. Well, as you can see from the Katherine Lee Bates situation, there's Wellesley College, there's her home, there's her birth, that's where she's buried in Oak Grove Cemetery. Down in the lower left-hand corner, you have Pikes Peak or bust as she heads towards Purple Mountain's Majesty. And so Tony Bennett got his montage done, which had the name of every song that he ever sang, recorded around in very small print, all around the edge. And his comment was, I was going to write my autobiography, but now I don't have to.
I wasn't going to mention that, but it was quite a moment. We unveiled it at the Melody Tent, and he was there, and Joan stood next to him, and he was pretty awed by it. It was an amazing moment. But as this was, so it takes on a life of its own. And one of the first groups who get in touch with me, interestingly, I don't own the painting, but a member of the board said, you better hold on, you better own the copyright, because in owning the copyright, you will save a lot of politics and time with the board and an organization, an individual, a group of people. They can contact you, and you can give them permission to use the work. And so Scholastic book, Teaching American History with Art Masterpieces, requests to use the image with Scholastic as an interactive teaching aid for grades 4 through 8. And it's played quite a role with elementary schools throughout the country. And when textbooks are updated, every 10 years it seems a textbook is updated, I'll get calls literally from around the world, and they'll ask if they can use the image and include it in a new textbook. But it was quite an honor.
This is the piece right here. A lot of you will know Mark Schmidt, who has been the director of the Falmouth Historical Society for the last 10 years. And he's now been selected to be the executive director of the Mayflower Descendants up in Plymouth. We're going to miss him very much in Falmouth. But one of the things that came up is when he saw this, I mean, it's one of those things about being a prophet in your own land. Everybody knows Karen Rinaldo. Half of you have paintings of hers in your homes. And it's very easy to overlook who's among you. And then Mark saw this and he said, wait a second. That's Washington crossing the Delaware. You know, that's the Western Stampede in the upper left-hand corner. That's the Civil War. That's Woods' painting of Paul Revere's Ride. And there's Karen Rinaldo. How did that happen? Well, now you know how it happened. It's because of what she had done during the bicentennial and her representation of history through 20 years earlier. And there it is, hanging right there.
You know, when Kevin left the military, of course, you never leave the military, it's always a part of you, but what he always wanted to do was get involved in historical subjects, things that kind of fade from the memory of people, but bring them back and do some writing, some lectures, presentations, as we're doing this afternoon. For myself, at an early age, and I grew up in Shrewsbury on Worthington Ave. I know we have a member here from Shrewsbury. From an early age, that's all I wanted to do, was work with developing images and colors. So all of you, many of you who have grandchildren, you'll get a sense of what direction they might be going in, but it's important that they stay on that path. The next slide. So this was a temporary housing. Mark has this vision that he'll bring the 1621 painting to Falmouth, will connect the towns, Plymouth and Provincetown and the rest of the Cape Cod towns. Then COVID hits and we have the painting, but now where do we put it? So on the campus there's the Conan House, which was housing the painting, and next to it is the full size of the original. It's a tracing drawing which was signed off by the historians before it could actually go to the painting stage. If anybody's interested in seeing the video, the documenting of the painting, I'm doing 2 more talks in October and 2 in November at Museums on the Green. Come on down. Saturday mornings at 10 o'clock. This rear section of the Wicks house presently houses the painting, and the interior was redesigned by a local builder and made it environmentally comfortable with adequate temperature and access for wheelchair accessibility. So you can see the painting at the far end and the drawing to the right. So that's on tracing paper. Typically you would carve in the back side and then adhere that to the canvas and then redraw the work. So it went through several stages of drawing upon drawing. I mean, hundreds of pieces of tracing paper and the corrections to those stages.
You might talk about what else is in
And in that room, so we do, the peripheral of the room really addresses the life of the painting. And in the room we have a piece of live oak that was used in the reconstruction of the shallop, the little boat that the pilgrims would traverse the little waterways with. We have several of the images, like when it was presented and unveiled at Pilgrim Hall, we show the building there. Here's, we had a busload from Falmouth come down to Pilgrim Hall, and we had the unveiling there in 1995. So it was in an exhibit with N.C. Wyatt's work and Norman Rockwell's illustrations. And it was there for a period of time, and then it was transferred over to Plymouth Plantation, where it was there for 20 years and seen literally by hundreds of thousands of people who would come to visit, not only to see the rock, but they would come in to see the village, the recreation of the village.
I told Karen she should have kept this as a bedspread. That's pretty fascinating when you think about it. That's the front of Pilgrim Hall in Plymouth. And Karen, when I first met her and saw that, I was kind of pretty well awed by it. She said, you know, that's the only picture that I have. It was a snowy night, and it's a miserable painting. But I think it's a magic painting, picture, don't you? I mean, I think the lighting is just right for the drama of the moment. Yeah.
Another very important part of the story is the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian incorporates a story about the first Thanksgiving painting, and the text to the effect that says it has the accuracy. Pilgrim Plantation exhibit on the Thanksgiving featured this painting, First Thanksgiving by Karen Rinaldo, commissioned in 1994, to give an accurate picture of the native presence.
You know, when you look at the painting itself, that was excavated by a fellow named Harry Hornblower. The Hornblowers of Boston, the financiers and so forth, years gone by. In 1947, he had all the money that he could ever spend, and he was very interested in archaeology. So he created the village. So when you look at the village, that is historically how the village really was. That wasn't just a composite of somebody's imagination. That was research. And I'd like to say the village was built in 1947, but it took Karen to populate the village. And if you ever go there and you stand as you walk into the village, you will see these people standing there. It's really a magic moment when you see this and then you see the village.
Thank you. So again, it continues. In 2020, the 400th Committee in Plymouth created this book, the Massachusetts Chronicles, with Linda Coombs, who is a Wampanoag from the Vineyard, and a gentleman from England. And what it incorporated was 400 years of history. The idea behind it that each book would go into the school systems in Massachusetts. And it's interesting the way they did this. They laid it out as if someone was reporting on the scene as history is being made. So there's a reporter and he's there, and I'm here at the first Thanksgiving, and goes on to describe. And when people ask, how long did it take to create the book? We say that it took 27 years. Because I would say to Kevin, you know, there's a story to be told here. Really is something interesting that could come out of this. We need to tell it in a book. And I've known Kevin for a long time and respected his instincts, but he was taking his time on this, and I wondered why. And he was thinking about it. He was very seriously considering just how would you address it, because it's a very important time in our history. And since we told it in the wake of the Mayflower, it has been said by the Wampanoags, very important to us, that it has been told in a very sensitive way. Not only was the painting conveyed in a sensitive way, but the words in the book and the truth that it really conveys have been said as fairly, I think, as possible. So here's the cover design, and you see the tone of one part of the arm of the cape is different from the rest, and that really represents the Nauset tribe. And it also denotes the landing points from when the Mayflower landed in Provincetown, and then Pilgrim Springs, the Corn Hill incident, which becomes a controversial factor. We can talk about that. The first encounter, and then taking the shallop over to the colonization area in Plymouth. This is the part where I'm going to give Kevin a little bit of time at the microphone, but addressing these 4 points is an important part of the history, so I'm going to give Kevin this mic.
Yeah, for one thing, we're going to stop talking about the painting, but isn't that painting spectacular? And if you get the chance to get down to the Historical Society one Saturday morning between 10 and noon, you're really going to be impressed. You know, you've seen pictures now, and we've talked about it and so forth, but when you see 5 foot by 3 foot painting right in front of you, the colors are vibrant and you really feel the history. We've tried to recreate that in the book. Now, there's plenty of books about the Mayflower and the Pilgrim experience and so forth. We didn't want to just create another one. We wanted to focus on the vignettes that really made a difference, where one person made a difference or one person affected the history of all of us to follow. But we were asked one time about putting it in chronological order. No. And so what we do is we really look at the Nauset territory from 1602 until we got here. And we start with the Nauset story, who were Wampanoag Indians. No, like I said, I don't. No, we're right. And then we pick up the Pilgrim story from the time they left England and went to Holland and to Amsterdam and then down to Leiden, and then finally arrived in Plymouth. And we take that story of their presence here all the way up to King Philip's War in 1675, which is really kind of interesting. That was also the lifespan of Massasoit and Governor Bradford and some of the key leaders of the Plymouth plantation lived for another 40 years after the Pilgrims arrived. So we pick up at King Philip's War, and then because of what Karen did with the montages there at the back of the book, we really pick up the development of the 15 Cape Cod towns, with Sandwich and Bourne being found actually by the Mass Bay colony, not Plymouth colony. All the others pretty much fall out of the purchase of East Ham. So one of the things that comes up in different historians want to debate whether they knew they were pilgrims, and we say, yeah, of course they knew they were pilgrims. This is the prologue to the Canterbury Tales that Geoffrey Chaucer wrote in 1387. And wandered out with his shoot of salt to the took march of passage of the road, and long and folk took on in pilgrimages. I gotta say it in Anglo-Saxon because my mother paid for the course. They went on pilgrimages, and they go especially from every year's end of England to Canterbury. So they go down and see the Archbishop of Canterbury and buy an indulgence. So pilgrimages were going on for many, many centuries. Karen created this harbor scene of Amsterdam in 1600, and it's important to think about the fact that when the Pilgrims came, we look at those rustic little huts that they created and so forth, and say, wow, they must have had a tough life. They had a real tough life. At this point, 400 years, Westminster Abbey has been around for 400 years. They left beautiful brick buildings. The town of city of Amsterdam there, and then they went down to Leiden. Leiden had been the presence of a university, had been there for 100 years. So they were very sophisticated people, lived a very good life. In a typical harbor scene in Amsterdam, you would have seen ships much akin to the Mayflower, and also the Charlotte down there on the right-hand side, steeples and so forth. Somebody else says, how far back do you go in your book? And so, well, we go back to the Holy Roman Empire. You go, oh, great. Well, and it's kind of important to just start there very quickly, because after the fall of Rome, the governance of the basically all of Europe, from England over to Turkey, fell to the Pope and his archbishops. So it was the Holy Roman Empire, it was the Holy Catholic Empire in many ways, until about the 1500s when Martin Luther said, no, this isn't going right. You know, you don't buy your way into heaven, that can't be. And so in 1517, he goes and knocks on the door, as we all know, in Germany, and says, no, we have to make some reformations here. And he does. And at about the same time, King Henry VIII in 1539 says, hey, I've been married to Catherine of Aragon for 20 years, and I still don't have an heir. I need a new wife. And the Pope said, no, not going to happen. And so King Henry says, okay, the heck with that then. I'll go start my own religion too. And he creates the Church of England, which enables him to do anything. After about 700 years of him, was it 700? No, let's see, 1539. No, it's 80 years. Once again, you had separatists, you had Puritans, who said, no, if it's not in the Bible, it shouldn't be in the liturgy. It shouldn't be part of the religion. And so Puritans came in two stripes. There were those who said, well, we'll stay inside the church and we'll try to bring things around. Or there were those who separated from the church and said, no, we have to really start our own religions as well. So when you hear about the Pilgrims being separatists, they make it sound like it's a bad thing. There's lots of separatists. Basically, the whole Protestant Reformation was about separation. Additionally, as far as Pilgrims are concerned, William Bradford, right there on his pedestal, says, of course they knew they were Pilgrims as the fourth line. And they didn't look upon the things that they left behind, but they lifted up their eyes to the heavens and the dearest country and quieted their spirits. They were committed to be here.
This is, for some, they say this is a very hopeful image. I see this as a very desperate image. They've left behind some family members, their friends, their way of life, as Kevin said. And as all of you know, you make a plan, you're going on a trip, and you have some idea of what you're doing and what the course will be. But there's a lot of the unexpected. So you say, well, didn't they know what they were in for? I think they knew why they had to leave. And they handed off a note by their spiritual advisor, Reverend Robinson, who I believe had a big hand in the Mayflower Compact. And I think that they were already thinking about this as they're making this voyage. What do they do when they land? How will they keep this body of people intact?
And just real quickly, before we get to the compact, I just wanted to sort of describe the voyage, because, so how did they get here? Why did they land at the Cape first? They were sailing across, and Gosnold had already been here. We all know Bartholomew Gosnold discovered Cape Cod. And he had mapped it. He didn't go to settle it or anything, but he mapped it. So just 3 days before they get here, after 2 months at sea, the Mayflower gets blown off course and ends up landing right about there at the National Seashore. And the captain recognizes it and says, no, we want to go south, because they were aiming for the mouth of the Hudson River. That had been sort of the Dutch were already there. They were thinking about colonizing down there and so forth. So we went to around Monomoy there, around Chatham. And we all know that you don't round around Chatham. You know, you go around. And Captain Clark knew it too, so he said, no, this isn't a good idea. So he turns around on that November day, had enough light to go back up towards Provincetown and go around and seek refuge in the Hook. So they do that. There's a little thing reminding you that Gosnelder was here in 1602. And Champlain had been here in 1606. People knew about it. Here's the Mayflower itself. Anybody get to see it transit the canal?
Yep.
Wasn't that exciting?
Yes.
Huh? I thought that was great. Yeah, we were there and we took the picture of that entourage that came, that escorted the Mayflower through the canal. Excellent, it was a great day. So here they are in Provincetown. They land November 11th. There's a monument right there. You've all been out there, or easy enough to get to. There's the walkway over. Here's Pilgrim Monument. You can see from everywhere. And then you can see it again. And then Karen decided to talk about the Mayflower Compact, so I'll ask you to keep talking.
Yeah, so a very precious document. Actually, it wasn't called a compact when it was written. It was called an agreement, a combination they actually called it. It wasn't until 150 years later that it's actually called a compact. But we call it a covenant, and to be called a covenant, it's all about the witnessing of how it's created. And it has to be recognized by either a civil body or a religious group, authorization from a religious group. The first 5 words of the opening of the compact read, "In the name of God, amen." And they've used the word God. We call it a covenant. It is known as the Mayflower Compact, but it has the undertones of a very do-good policy, that civil body politic. It was written by varied members of this group coming over in this journey of the servants of entrepreneurs and the common man among the pilgrims. And so it's a first declaration of some order that they needed to have so that the people wouldn't just jump ship and they'd be helter-skelter. They knew this. And again, I say that I believe it was inspired by their spiritual advisor.
And they formed into a civil body politics, as it says right there. This is really incredible. And we shall be for the general good of the colony, and to which we promise all due submission and obedience. Never before in the history of mankind had anybody been led that way. They've been led by kings, by rulers, by despots. Somebody was always at the head of the pyramid. No, not so here. And this is what's relation. This is the real words that's spoken contemporaneously. And so is it the forerunner of the Constitution? That's oftentimes debated, but take a look at what it does. It says they're going to be majority rule. There'll be democratic governance. Unheard of. Independence. They knew they were on their own at that point. They had to be self-sufficient. They weren't going to have a monarchy, but they weren't going to have anarchy either. And we like to think, in our interpretation of history, we're saying, well, that pretty much defines the American spirit. We paid a lot of homage to this Mayflower Compact, and there's the Forefathers Monument. If you've been up there, you've seen it in relief carved into the granite. It's also right there at the base of the Pilgrim Monument, and there it is depicted again. The depiction probably isn't totally accurate. You see women and children. That was unlikely to happen. But what you did see was men of every station in life agreeing. They had pilgrims on that ship. They had soldiers. The sailors weren't committed to it because they weren't going to stay. The soldiers were, and there were some merchants, as you may recall as well, which the pilgrims called the strangers, that were filling out the boat. So everything that we did, we went back to the prime source, which every historian does, which is called Maud's Relation, probably written by Governor Bradford and Edward Winslow as a diary. So they're writing it as they go. And that's what we did.
And we rely on Maud's Relation because of the immediacy of how this journal is kept, remembering that they are in survival mode every day, and they're not as apt to be creating a diary, a journal on a daily basis. So they're surviving, and that's a 24/7 job. And this illustration out of the book shows, again, those points that they land in Provincetown, Cornhill, the encounter at the first encounter, and then over to Clark's Island and Plymouth. So they have their first drink of fresh water at Pilgrim Spring. They're making 3 expeditions through some very rough and tough terrain. And now I think we're really going to the state of mind. They're having a first sip of fresh water. They're starving. They've come off of a horrendous journey. And they're making their way now to this area called Cornhill in Truro. So there's 16 of them, 16 pilgrims going along what is called Pilgrim Pond. There's a monument, a little marker there. And they make their way to Cornhill. The next slide, I think, shows the pond, and then this distant shot with Cornhill in the background. This really goes to a pivotal moment, I think. Again, I emphasize it's a state of mind. There's a marker at the bottom of this hill explaining they're going up and finding some corn. They take this corn. The words that is used by other historians is that they've stole some corn. We're acknowledging that they have taken some corn because they are returning. They're making recompense to the people. If we can find who's, well, we'll read it right from here, which we call this place Cornhill. And sure it was God's good providence that we found this corn, for else we know not how we should have done. So soon as we can meet conveniently with them, we will give them full satisfaction. Which further on in the journey, there's a young man, the Billington boy, gets lost in the woods. He's returned by a sachem to another sachem, Aspinet from Nauset. They have this discussion back and forth, and they do return. They make some, whatever the trade was that they make. And so we say that, yes, we acknowledge they took the corn, but we don't use the words that they stole the corn. And there's a marker at the top of the hill here in a very obscure place. It'd be hard to find. We had a guide showing us around this area. First encounter, and Kevin will address this too, but this particular view inspired a lot of work that I did for the town of Eastham during their celebration, commemoration of 2020. So if you'd like to talk a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah, this was a very interesting thing, and once again, Karen was commissioned by the town of Eastham for the 400th anniversary, based upon going back to the series she did for the nation's bicentennial once again. So there we were, we went up to look around the place together, and this was the view, and if you look, I can do this part right there. I think the whole first encounter happened probably right about there. And everything you read and everything you can piece together. Because right up here, it's only a 15-minute skirmish, and it only happens first thing in the morning. We learned about a lot about how to fight, a lot of American tactics that we assume as soldiers. We learned from the Indians, we learned from the natives, because they would attack at first light. That was the standard practice. They'd get you before you woke up, before you got out of your sleeping bag, whatever the situation was. That's when they would attack. It'd be totally unnerving. They'd come in with their shrieks and so forth, wake you up, rustle you out, and then start the warfare before you were ready. So when you think about the contact, there was probably about 30 Indians. Nobody knows for sure how many there were. It was hard to count, but we know there was 16 or 17 pilgrims. Most of them were up on top of the hill. A couple of them were right down the bottom with a shallop because they had spent the night there while they were exploring for more food. When you think about it, in those 15 minutes, you had the Wampanoags who could shoot rabbits with a bow and arrow. You know, they would chase game and shoot them with a bow and arrow. You had the English soldiers who had blunderbusses, and all you had to do was shoot the thing and somebody's going to get hurt. And yet, at the skirmish, nobody was killed, nobody was injured. Nobody bought of anything. And we think that was kind of providential. They have a monument right there. This is the Pilgrim one. This was put there in 1920. It's really kind of interesting when you think about the 300th anniversary. There's a lot of monuments there. The portico over Plymouth Rock, the statues that you see in Plymouth, all put there for the 300th anniversary. There's very little physical stuff from the 400th. Most of it is stuff like Karen and I just did, or somebody writing a book. This is the first encounter, just recognizing the Wampanoag presence, same verbiage basically, except the language up there talks something about saving our culture. And that's how we kind of look at it too. We think this was a battle for two cultures, our own that we were establishing, as well as preserving the Wampanoag culture as well, which we did very successfully for any number of years. We can talk about that. So this is, they named the place right then and there. After we had given God thanks, we took our shallop and went on our journey and called this place the First Encounter. Didn't say first battle, didn't say any of those sorts of things. First Encounter. We actually wrote one of the chapters. You like our chapters, by the way, you know, because my military background is 4 paragraphs, and then Karen has the painting. So it's four paragraphs in a picture, you know. We tried to make this too tough. But one of the chapters is the inevitable counter, and you look at it and you say, okay, it was a new world, it was home ownership, cultivate the land, honor the king, laws, ordinances, constitution, Englishmen. We'll call it New England. At the same time, it's an ancient land. It's tribal territory, hunting grounds, great spirit, breed beans, corn, squash, pole beans, wildflower. We actually call it Nauset. So down the bottom, the clash of cultures was inevitable. And how the clash would be resolved would determine the success of this attempt of the English to colonize the English land. And it was. When you think back to the previous colonization efforts, they tried in North Carolina and the Indians drove them off. They tried in Jamestown. They were just ready to be driven off. When they were restored and refreshed by Lord Delaware. And so that was why, probably, but here in Plymouth, they were there for 4 months before Massasoit even came over to see what they were doing. It was in March when Massasoit showed up. And things went very well, and that's what Karen portrays.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to a couple of points. One, the National Association of Congregational Christian Churches had commissioned a plaque 100 years ago of Reverend Robinson that appears on the Peterskirk Church in Leiden. And 100 years later, they commissioned the painting, so they had 2 commissions. We're talking now about the shallop. It was, to me, a fascinating piece. I call it the first prefab, actually, because it came in 2 parts. And the pilgrims used it as a protection, a place to hide, to sleep in when they were in their journey. And both pieces would float. And then they would assemble it. It would take a while to assemble it when they were on land. And these are some close-ups of the return of the shallop after it had been under restoration to Plymouth Harbor. We were down for that reunion there. This was a logo that was developed for Eastham. Interesting in the conditions for this, they said they didn't want any people to be present in the designing of the logo. So I thought, how could you represent presence of people. So I went with the subliminal message of smoke coming up out of the dune, and that would establish a presence of an encampment, life, something going on there. And they use that on banners, T-shirts, and different items in their town. This was a montage that was developed for them, and we used what was significant to them, the shallop at the First Encounter Beach, as the center focus of that piece. I have to make a comment about the treaties, the treaty that the Wampanoag tribe and Chief Massasoit, Governor Bradford. You know, the fact that there was hardship on both sides, the numbers that had been lost during the plague for the natives was thousands. I mean, it nearly decimated the tribe. I get a little emotional about that because also for the Pilgrims, they lost half of their population. So the numbers are great on one side, but by comparison, there's still loss. We're talking about loss. To find nothing left in your area, nothing but bones, is incredible to me to see now two cultures coming together to create a peace treaty. And I'll let you talk a little bit about that.
Very, very briefly, because you know the rest of the story in many ways, so we don't, and it's where we just move along. The point of the harvest, people say, well, was there such a thing as the first Thanksgiving? Well, we think so. We think what you're looking at is what Karen just said. It was the two people coming together. It was everybody meeting around the same table, and it was a 3-day feast, and you see the first of the 3 days. That's why you see the Indian population kind of standing together, a little bit rigid. Naturally, they would be. And one of the big debates among the historians is, were they there for protection or were they there for frivolity? And it was probably both. But when you think about what happened to the previous colonies, here they are, 90 people, 90 braves, and we talk about the 50 Mayflower survivors. Half of them were women and children under 17. So the numbers are really...
Yeah, I make a comment in the video, and I talk about using the word celebration, and the celebration is not used in terms of gaiety. For the Pilgrims, it was about having survived a first tough winter, so, because for all intents and purposes, they shouldn't have still been standing. And for the natives, too. I mean, they had survived an atrocity. So now you have the coming together of those two cultures. And we have a legend that appears on the back of prints that identifies all of the people in the painting. And we go into who the key players are at the table feast: Bradford and Winslow, Hobbamock, Squanto, and Massasoit, the three who appear at the table feast as well. And we're coming up on the last couple of minutes, and I want to give a closing comment to this image. We show houses that the Pilgrims were unfamiliar with. These structures were an unfamiliar scene to the natives. We show fenced-in areas of land the animals were contained in. The natives never would have done that. This was a time when the fields had been harvested. The colors of autumn was something that the Pilgrims were not familiar with as well. We show the shallop in the back of the river there. But I'd like to just leave you with the message, if I may, of what I hope you take away from this scene. And that is that in 400 years, I don't think things have changed that much. I think we're all still striving to have that peace, for safety and freedom. And it's what the Pilgrims and it's what the natives were looking for then. It's what we're hoping for today. And the similarities are far greater than our differences. And I think if we remember that, we'll have peace a lot sooner. So that is an educational piece. The schools, the Wampanoags have embraced this. And I hope that you've enjoyed our presentation. There's so much more we could talk about, but I hope you come to a couple more talks too. So thank you all for coming out today.
We have time for questions. Is there You wanna know something for your own Thanksgiving tables, and, you know, what can I tell the grandkids? Question?
I'm struck by the fact that they're separated. Did they remain separated for those all 3 days, or was there ever any intimate?
That was, they had just arrived. So you're stepping back at that particular moment where they're there to protect Massasoit. That was why they assembled. There were no women on the native side. They wouldn't have brought women or children because they didn't know what they were in for. So according to Nanny Passionette, the Wampanoag in charge of the Indigenous Affairs and Plantation, he kind of gave that depiction of how their attitude would be, and then it was my responsibility to kind of group them and lay them out in a naturalness as well to how it would have looked within that space and in that place.
Hi, I'm shamelessly commercial. I bought this book at the bookstore in Mashpee Commons. Their book is signed by both people, and I know that the owner of the store has lots more copies. And maybe you could buy it today, I don't know. But anyway, it's going to make me the resident know-it-all at the Thanksgiving table.
We don't have books, but the Mashpee Commons bookstore does, yeah, down on Market Street. Is there any?
Christine would have been here today, but she had to get everybody to
Yeah, and behind the Pilgrims, you know, we had the 1630 was all about the Mass Bay Colony. There were different people from the Pilgrims. They had a different philosophy. They came looking for riches from the new land and so forth. And so that created a lot of the friction that ended up with King Philip's War. The Pilgrims were the good guys. That's the message.
Thank you guys so much.
Hey, thank you.
Okay, we're going to do the 50-50 raffle. Thank you, everybody. Got $180. $90 goes to breast cancer awareness. And we split $90, and then I have centerpieces. Thank you, Susie Rigo. And committee. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the first prize, cash prize, goes to 652002. Second one, 651955. 651955. Okay. And the third one, 651917. 917. You got a winner? You can come up and get them if you want. Okay, so the centerpieces on each table. If you win one on your table, first prize. Okay, pick one from the table. If it's already taken, then take one from another table. The first one is 651971. Okay. 651992. 651899. 651961. 651947. That would be me. And I got another one, so I picked another number. 651911. My table's doing good. 651920. 651920. Yes, no, maybe? You got it? Okay. 652007. Oh, look at that table. What a winning table that is. 651922. 651-922. Is that you? 651-98, that was you? 922. 651-980. Okay. Thank you so much.